will say this, all week we're trying to find somewhere cheap to eat, so there's nowhere.
Not in DC.
The very last day we go, we start walking down there, we looked like literally by what we walked at the school, like.
Another call user.
And they had a little diner in the back.
Good afternoon. I have another call-in user, 7153, last 288, disappeared. Gone. Forget it. Huh? James.
All right, being after 4 o'clock, we'll call the Marathon County Executive Committee to order, please. We will move on to item number 2, public comment. Anyone wishing to address the Executive Committee? Nobody has approached me, so we'll move on to item number 3, approval of the February 9th, 2022 Executive Committee meeting minutes. What is your pleasure? Motion by Vice Chair McEwen and seconded by Supervisor Langenhahn. Any discussion on the motion and the minutes as printed in the packet? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the February 9th, 2022 Executive Committee meeting minutes signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carried and is unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to discussion and input from the onboarding for newly elected county board supervisors. Put this agenda item on. There is going to be an onboarding process for those new supervisors. Again, the election on April 5th will include at least a minimum of 8 new supervisors for the Marathon County Board. That is clear because we have 7 individuals that have filed non-candidacy paperwork, and we also had 1 vacant seat. So at a minimum, we'll have 8, and so I wanted recommendations other than the standard stuff that we'll be going through. If there's something that each of you as standing committee chairs sees as important to discuss with the onboarding of those new supervisors, and that onboarding will take place prior to the first organizational meeting on February 19th. So, thoughts? Supervisor Robinson?
I assume you're going to be covering the various committees and responsibilities. Will there be an educational portion relative to the budget and the budget process?
Yes, there will. Yes, there will. So we will have, a presentation by Corp Counsel as it relates to open meetings laws, as it relates to our board rules, and we will go through as much depth as we need to as far as the organizational meeting and how that will take place and how the board rules get adopted and how that is the guiding principle that guides the operations of this board for the next 2 years. And then we'll also go through the open meetings law and conflict of interest. So those are just, and then we will also are looking to have a understanding and a brief description of each of the standing committees and each of the jurisdictions that the standing committees have role of responsibility over. So for example, if it were ERC, they would have Parks and Rec, just to mention one of the committees, their role as far as oversight. Supervisor Robinson, go ahead.
I think it's important for the onboarding, but also for current board members to talk about the open records law, the use of personal emails and text messages in particular, because I keep getting a growing number of those from supervisors, and those, I just tell them, it's a 7-year records retention policy. Use the county email. But I think
correct.
If we could do that, but expand that to all of
There,
us?
there's another presentation that's going to have, like I said, this was for the new supervisors, but I also want, there's a presentation that we're going to have for the full board and renewal of information for the full board also. Supervisor Robinson, go ahead.
You know, it was, I'm thinking back to my days in the legislature, both as a first-term legislator and then as a more senior one, but there was always a forum where they brought in a newer county board member, current county board members, and sort of talked about what to expect from the position. I think particularly in these times, but, you know, where do you go? How do you interface with staff? And having that from not only leadership, but a new person's, a new current member's perspective, that might be helpful. Sort of the
Just taking notes, thank you. I think you hit something there that has never historically been part of the orientation, but could be something valuable. Other thoughts, suggestions? Vice Chair McCune.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is not only for the new county board supervisors, but for the returning ones. What do we do about parking? And I know it sounds like, well, what are you talking about? I've talked, many supervisors have received parking tickets. Is there anything that we can do to make some agreement with the city of Wausau if they want to make money, you know, off of the, I would be more than happy to pay for a permit. I don't want to take the spots that are out there, and I understand this is going to affect everybody. So is there anything we can try to do to resolve this parking issue? I know it shouldn't be that difficult, but unless somebody, I don't know who you would approach or who would approach the city of Wausau to see if we could get parking permits, or I don't know, but is that something that I think we should try to resolve before the new board comes on? Just a thought.
Okay, I will potentially take that up with the mayor. Sarah, go ahead.
Do you have anything planned about just maybe some best practices and legals when it comes to constituent communication, especially with social media? I think I'm fairly certain I was one of the first supervisors to utilize Facebook as a platform to communicate regularly with my constituents, but now there's quite a few who have started to do that, and I think it's being done in a variety of ways, and it would probably be a good idea to clarify how to speak in a social media platform so that it is clear that it is a personal opinion versus an opinion of the board, and where that line is differentiated, that you're clarifying that you're not losing your personal voice, but this is how you're supposed to support when a vote has been taken, and just making sure that we've got some clarity there. So I think that would probably be something that would be very helpful for new members and potentially even current ones.
Others, Supervisor Boots.
Sorry. Thanks, Craig. So, Kurt, what do you have set up, or what do we have set up currently? Are they going to have like a new member orientation that night after we're done with our meeting? That very night? Is it the next day? What is your I guess I'd like with the original plan.
Yeah, as soon as the election will take place, obviously, on April 5th. Right now, we should know the results, even though they're not certified, as far as the election results, April 6th. And so we should know who the new supervisors are going to be. And I will be reaching out to them and scheduling right now a meeting of them prior to, right now it's tentatively the 8th or the 13th of April, prior to our April 19th meeting. And it may be potentially both of those days, depending on how long we decide to run the meeting or that information and education. But they will be meeting, that presentation and onboarding will happen prior to the first meeting of the board.
I guess the two things I would want to see on there is obviously the way our board functions as far as, a policy board, not an implementation board, and then the way that our standing committees work for going to the full board and how we need to respect that with a 38-member board. And then one more thing is I would say that we kind of explain the standing committees, and I don't know how other standing committee chairs have done it, but I've basically started from scratch. You're going to have to basically start from scratch at your first meeting, say, okay, go back for 2 years, kind of look at what we've done, but here's our roles and responsibilities. The first meeting, in my mind, is kind of just an informational, even if there is only 1 or 2 brand new members on there. I think you almost have to do that as a chair of that, but those are my inputs, I guess. Thanks.
Thank you, absolutely. Supervisor Longenhan, go ahead. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing I would just bring up for the rest of the executive committee's consideration, with the ERC and our tight turnaround time with new members and them being brought up to speed with particularly the rezone process, one thing that we did 2 years ago when COVID had initially hit was that we developed a onboarding training video just on rezones to give the members an introductory review of the rezone process. So I think that's a great idea to go over the roles and responsibilities to each of the committees, but I would encourage the rest of the standing committee chairs that maybe consider developing your own onboarding tools as well, given that we have so many potential, or I should say the high potential of new supervisors coming in for this next term. We're sort of blessed that we had this infrastructure in place due to COVID. But yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair McCune.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there going to be a tour? I know when I came on, we actually took a bus tour of different facilities.
That's being contemplated.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Seiler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These are all great suggestions for the beginning of the term. And what I would like to encourage, and there was quite a bit of discussion actually during Deb Hager's work with the board size task force and the interview that she did with all of the supervisors in that effort. And there were some comments about the need for continued education. There's great programs for staff and support, but when it comes to the county supervisors, other than the onboarding, or, to your Supervisor Longenhan's suggestion, perhaps that gets started in the standing committees, but in WCA and UW Extension, I always forget the exact title of the department that does the supervisor, the training for county supervisors. They do tremendous programs all year long, and a lot of them, they're very relevant to the issues and the topics that we deal with all the time. But unless you are county leadership or standing committee chair, you're not likely to be in attendance at those functions in person. But there are virtual opportunities, and I'm just wondering, because it's not like people are looking for things to do in the evening, but perhaps even leadership or the chairs of the executive or standing committees could be monitoring some of those presentations, and there could be excerpts at our educational meetings, or there's just so many opportunities there that I believe are being missed, and there's no cost for that. But I really, really feel that we need to do more to support the continuing education needs for the supervisors. And it's not just onboarding. It should be a continual process, just as we do for staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other suggestions? Supervisor Longenhan.
One last thing to drive this point home, because I don't think it can be understated. Supervisor Boots had brought up earlier the importance of the new supervisors understanding that we are a policy body and that we have a committee system to do this work. And I think the importance of trusting in both of those functions is really important for the success of a first-term supervisor. I do not want to have to spend time explaining to a new county board supervisor why we don't care about what color the barn in the Marathon County Park is painted. That's an administrative function. We do not care. That is not a policy matter. So that really needs to be hammered in during this process, not once, but numerous times. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, very good. Thank you. Thank you for all those great input. We'll move on to approval of the grant agreement between Marathon County North Central Community Services Program and the State of Wisconsin Department of Administration. I'll tee it up a little bit. Marathon County and North Central Community Services Program Board, also known as North Central Healthcare, has been awarded a $5 million grant to assist in the remodeling of the campus down there. And in exchange for that grant, there's a requirement that we offer these services for some of the neighboring counties that are not members of the Tri-County Agreement that is available to our neighboring counties. And so the state is saying, you know, we'll give you this, but in exchange for that, you must offer and continue to offer for 10 years this service. And also in concert with that, they will be putting a lien against Marathon County's property on the North Central campus for that $5 million for the term of the loan. Which is a 20-year note because it is a bonding, it's being bonded for by the state. So the question is to this committee, and it was discussed at HR, Finance, and Property yesterday, and was approved unanimously to accept the $5 million from the state, understanding that there's a commitment for offering these services to neighboring counties, understanding also in the context that the tri-county members will come first as far as those services and rooms being offered. But if we cease to offer those services prior to the 10-year expiration, that we could be in a position in default and required to pay back the $5 million to the state. So I wanted this committee to weigh in on whether or not they want to continue or accept that $5 million based on those conditions that are being set forth by the state. We don't have, there's a couple of things that are still being negotiated as far as the actual agreement itself, and that's why you don't have in the packet the actual agreement, because some of the legal language is still being worked out between Corp Counsel's office and the state of Wisconsin. And so, like I said, I can't provide you with the actual legal document, but I give you the premise for what we're looking at. And Administrator?
Just, Mr. Chair, you do have the most recent draft, I believe, is in the packet, but I think you've explained it very well. The only thing I will add from an administration perspective, as Chair Gibbs referenced, we're continuing to work out a couple of details, but succinctly put, the area that we're talking about is the inpatient mental health hospital renovation, which the county, the three counties, Lincoln, Langlade, Marathon, and Marathon County, of course, is where this is located. It's right on the campus on Lakeview Drive. You had approved this renovation with all of your own money. Costs have been coming in higher, so we sought out potential ways to offset those costs. The state has offered through the Building Commission this $5 million grant. These are not services that, in my estimation, we're likely to move away from. They've been services that Marathon County, Lincoln, and Langlade County have been seeking to increase in terms of access. So the agreement, as Chair Gibbs referenced, is that we will utilize the $5 million to fund a portion of the renovation. The thing we're still discussing with the state is the state, through the building commission, has a couple of different approaches. One, when they build a new building, they utilize a simple formula. The cost of the new building is the denominator. The amount the state funds is the numerator, so the top of that fraction. So if you were to assume this was a new building, it would be 5 million on the top, and let's say the building cost was, and what our renovation is 13 million. But because this is a renovation as opposed to a new building, you don't use the renovation cost on the bottom, you use the total overall building value, the appraised value of the building. And why that's important is it's because it's going to give you essentially the amount of ownership interest or the interest the state would have in that piece of property. So we're gonna have 5 million, the state's $5 million grant on top. The total value of that building, let's just assume it's going to be 25 million, because our renovation value is 13. That's what we're spending to renovate the space. That is not the full cost to build the new building. So their ownership interest is going to be far, or their interest, should we decide to move away, is gonna be far less than that 5 million over 13 million. But in any event, these are services that have been long-standing priorities for Marathon County. I can't certainly tell you there's no risk here. There's certainly risk, but the choice before you is you have already approved this renovation. The renovation is proceeding. We either accept $5 million or we don't. So it was, as Chair Gibbs indicated, approved by HR Finance at its meeting on Tuesday. The North Central Healthcare Board is fully in support of, was fully in support of seeking the grant. North Central itself, in terms of staff and leadership, were involved along with county staff in conversations with Senator Petrusky, who offered it at the Building Commission, and both Jill Meschke, I don't know if Jill is on again today, but the interim CEO for North Central Healthcare, herself and I did attend the State Building Commission discussion of this item. So certainly I think it's a good opportunity. And as the chair referenced, the 3 counties, Lincoln, Langlade, Marathon, still have priority on those beds. We are not required under this agreement that if we're going to offer this service, as the agreement indicates, to Vilas and Oneida counties, that if a Vilas County resident is asking to, or Vilas County wants one of their residents in the inpatient hospital, that we need to find another place for a Marathon, a Lincoln, or a Langlade County resident. That flexibility is built in through the work of Corp Council. So I apologize for going on, but I certainly, if anyone has any questions, happy to answer them.
Vice Chair McCune, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Administrator Leonard answered part of the question about the other forests, Oneida and Vilas County. If they, if the beds are full, or we don't have to make exceptions for them. So, yeah, and I agree that this service is not going away. It's going to be here a lot longer than 10 years. So, I think that this is something that we should support. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I would seek a motion in support of accepting the grant and moving that to the full board for its consideration. Motion by Supervisor Robinson and a second by Vice Chair McEwen. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve and accept the grant for the renovation of North Central Healthcare, the inpatient hospital portion or part of that remodel. All those in favor of accepting that grant and moving it to the full board for its consideration signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to item D, prioritization of the administrator's 2022 work plan. And the work plan is in the packet. And I would ask the administrator to at least give a high 15,000 foot view of what the committee had asked him to do and how he accomplished that in the new draft plan that you have before you, and then we can take up the prioritization.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. You asked me essentially, as I understood it, to go through the document and try to identify those items within the work plan that, in terms of projects that have already begun, or those projects that are new projects that, if they were stopped or not started, what would the level of impact be on operations? And I sought to do that simply by color coding. So you'll see at the top, if I thought that the project could be stopped or not started with little or no impact operations, I highlighted the column in green. If I felt as though stopping or not starting the project would have considerable operational impacts, I highlighted that in yellow. And if I thought that stopping or not starting the project would have significant operational impacts, not that you can't stop it. I mean, you can stop if your direction is to stop doing any of these projects. We certainly will, staff will follow through on that policy direction. But in my mind, it was kind of a gradation in terms of scale, considerable being less than significant, and again, the significant were in red. Happy to answer any questions. I can give a couple of updates as well if you have questions on various projects. We certainly have continued to work on all these items while the committee is undertaking its work. Specifically with respect to childcare, we're having an important meeting we had an important meeting this week. We're looking forward to submitting a grant. Been working with North Central Technical College, the City of Wausau, Wausau School District, as well as the DC Everest School District, and Child Caring, which is a local nonprofit, and others, trying to identify what are some steps we can take to improve access to childcare. There's a grant available through the state of Wisconsin with a due date of April 4th. It's a strategic planning grant, at least that's how I'm describing it. It's not to really start to make any substantial changes, but work together, have access to technical assistance. So that we will continue to move forward with unless through this process you tell us not to. The Discover Wisconsin ARPA project that was approved, have a signed agreement with Discover Wisconsin, have had a meeting with them as well as a meeting with the local Convention and Visitors Bureau. That has gone well. Still waiting on a contract for the Community Partners Campus. And all of your nonprofits that are funded through the county board budget process, all of the updated annual contracts, the performance contracts with each of those have been updated and signed by each of the parties. So we've been making considerable progress, but happy to answer any other specific questions you might have.
Any specific questions? I guess one other, just an additional comment. You know, when we had this discussion a little bit last executive committee, I asked you to take back to your committees and come up with some of what I deemed your priorities and your committee's priorities, and bring that back for discussion, because I think, as I see it right now, we have 19 or 20 items on the administrator's work plan that are coded red, meaning stopping would be significant operational impacts. And granted, they are all high priorities, but I think the one thing that I don't want to do is I don't want to have a situation where we're going to do, at a later point on the agenda, we're going to be doing the administrator's evaluation. And I don't want and I think we need to provide some priority to the administrator that we are going to utilize to, hold him accountable on his evaluation. What I don't want to do is, even though there's an item on the work plan right now that's green, and it may in fact actually get still worked on. However, if something is on the work plan that's green and we know that there's capacity issues, I don't want a supervisor degrading or downgrading the administrator's performance because an item that's in green was not a high priority item and did not get addressed during his work plan this year, 2022. when we do his evaluation come January of 2023. So that's the context that I'm trying to present around why I'm looking for this committee to provide some guidance as far as prioritization of the projects. Supervisor Langenau, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, at this time, are you interested in the priorities that our standing committees each have identified?
Yes, I am.
Got it. ERC identified, and I believe these are in ranked according to importance, with the first being listed highest to the lowest. Number 1 is the ARPA funds. Number 2 is the comp strat plan refresh, and number 3 is long-term facilities plan.
Thank you. Others? Supervisor Robinson?
We didn't
Didn't get to it, I understand.
We didn't do it. I thought about it at 8 o'clock on Monday night before the Tuesday meeting, and we didn't. But I don't, I think that the question that I have is that if we adopt the administrator's red, yellow, green proposal, would that give us the flexibility necessary to do it and sort of reflecting the priorities? So I would, I guess, ask where we differ from the red, yellow, green. I think that reflects administration's understanding of what their capacity is and what our ability to get things done is, unless there's a strong objection.
And I would not, that characterization, I think is appropriate. Again, understanding that the executive committee in January of '23 is tasked with doing the administrator's eval. And if we understand that the item on the administrator's work plan is already coded green, and we agree with that, and we have not told him differently, that we not judge the effectiveness of that project part of his evaluation. So the question becomes, is everybody comfortable with the coding that the administrator has provided in the work plan that's in the packet? Supervisor Boots.
So just.
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
All right, so yeah, the things that I saw, the CC, I mean, that was a huge one for the Public Safety Committee. That's gonna be a lot of focus, so I see that. The one thing I did wanna bring up, and I want Craig to basically fill us in, I did see with the morgue task force, is that considered, it's green, and I get that, are we, I guess, where are we going with that? The Regional Forensic Science Center, because I know that they've put a lot of time and effort into that, and I just kinda wanna know, I just want a clarification.
The administrator would like to weigh in on and provide some update.
I think that's a perfect example of why we can stop that project. And I tried to be very intentional with how I coded these. It's very easy to stop it, and it's not going to have any significant operational impacts beyond what we're already doing, because that's the current state. But I'm glad you brought that one up, because it's been a lot of work. The task force has done a lot of work. I don't suspect you want me to stop, but your task that you gave me last time wasn't, Mr. Administrator, what should we keep doing and what should we not? It was, what can't we stop? Or what would have a significant impact if we stopped? And right now, really, if you stop the morgue task force, there's not any more operational impact than what the current operational impact we have. I fully would expect, and if you hadn't brought it up, I was gonna prompt for a discussion, that you may wanna change that to say, hey, that's still a priority. Keep that moving forward, despite the fact that it wouldn't have any operational impact to stop it.
So going through the document that I see, that would be the only discrepancy I saw for public safety.
So your suggestion is to move the morgue the Regional Forensic Center from currently it's green to,
I would say a yellow, and that would be my suggestion, and
And if I can provide one other important update, I know Craig, Supervisor McEwen, who chairs the task force, is aware of this, but we did make a significant application for neighborhood investment grant dollars. Those awards were announced last week. Unfortunately, we did not receive an award. So the real work for that task force now is to finalize its recommendation and then for the county board to decide whether or not to expend the capital dollars and operational dollars to get that up and running if we were to do that.
Vice Chair McEwen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I saw that too, the morgue task force has so many projects that are going on as far as trying to get partnerships with different medical facilities. The latest was the grant from the neighborhood grant program. That didn't pan out, so I would hate to have it stop. Like I said, it's going to take significant work to start reaching out in different directions to get some type of partnership. So like I said, it doesn't take a whole lot of time. It's not something that the administrator works on every day, but there are days that he could be tied up with it for most of his day. So it's not a everyday issue. And like I said, I think yellow would be appropriate for it. So thank you.
Yeah, I think we're, one of the things that I think we need to provide clarity. Just because it is green does not mean that it's going to get stopped. There will continue to be work on it as time allows, and if the current recruitment for a deputy administrator pans out and we build additional capacity, more of those items may rise to the forefront on the work plan. However, again, it's just giving priority to the current, all of the items on, because all of the items on the work plan are significant in one way or another to various committees and citizens in this county. Any other thoughts? Again, at some point, we need to approve the administrator's work plan and move to the full board for its adoption. Mr. Robinson, Supervisor Robinson.
I would move that we adopt the administrator's work plan subject to the modification of the morgue task force from a green to a yellow and recommend county board approval.
Okay, is there a second? Second by Supervisor Leahy. Any discussion? Supervisor Lanahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So was that even necessary for me to provide that input from ERC earlier? Or am I the only one that did the homework?
You're just such an overachiever.
Yeah, you're an overachiever, I guess, is what I will say.
Stop, I'm good.
Any other discussion on the motion? Motion is to make a recommendation to the full board to adopt the administrator's current 2022 work plan with the coding as provided, with the one exception, and that is an upgrade for the Regional Forensic Center from green to yellow. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We will move back to an item that I overlooked, and that is item number 4C, authorization of the county support for the Public Service Commission broadband grants. And I will turn it over to the chair of the broadband task force, Supervisor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. We have an ever-evolving process that never is static, and if you want to lose some hair, it's I suggest you get active in the broadband arena. We started out by sending out to all of the internet service providers in Marathon County an invitation to submit projects to partner with us. We had 5 different firms submit proposals by February 14th. We decided we needed additional detail. They provided that by the 28th, and the Broadband Task Force looked at the proposals. We looked at various costs and other things and how we could maximize participation. And Supervisor Guild made a motion to establish a level of funding at $235 per unit, which was not the lowest cost, but the second lowest cost based on that, and then make grants available through the ARPA program for the balance. Loans available for the balance, and low interest or no interest loans. At that time, there were 5 companies, and we sat down with the internet service providers, because one of the things we learned in the past is that if you have overlapping grant request areas, both grant applications or all grant applications with that overlap tended not to be favorably considered by the PSC, part of her motion. As a result of those discussions and requests for additional information, LTD and charter dropped out. So we are now dealing with the issue of where do we go from there. We have proposals from Bug Tussle to serve approximately 605 new units in addition to their middle mile fiber project that we co-partnered with them last year. And they are interested in a loan, a long-term loan, for not only the amount that they originally requested, but all of the local share, which would be a maximum of $3 million. They would be entitled to a forgivable loan. What we want to do is we want to take that grant into a forgivable loan and have it forgiven at the time that the service is active. So that's the incentive. So that would be for approximately $142,175. Serenity gave a proposal to serve approximately 368 units, businesses, and homes in the Bevent-Reed area. They have a local match of $70,000 from the town of Reed through their ARPA funds. They've asked for $70,000 from us, and that's below the 235, so they would be funded at that level. Frontier came in. They're basically looking at trying to address some of the issues that have plagued their customers and provide fiber. These are all fiber projects, not wireless. And they all have the capacity to be at gigabyte service, although there will be difference in pricing. They're looking at serving a significant portion of the county. When we started on the 28th, they were looking at a significant portion of central eastern Marathon County is the best way to describe it, with pockets on the west side. When we sat in, they were looking for 944,835 from the county. We sat down with them and said there's a significant amount of overlap. There continues to be some with others. Can you work on it? We haven't reconciled all of the overlap, but we've significantly reduced the areas of overlap. They are now up to a $17 million project serving approximately 10,696 residents if they fully, if everybody subscribes. But they're continuing to ask only for 944,000. So they haven't taken, in the way the action taken by the committee in the Finance Committee was to tie it into the February 28th proposals, not the ever-changing proposals, because we can't, they can change it right up to the 17th. So we are right now seeking letters of support from community members, organizations, schools, businesses, agricultural groups, healthcare institutions, et cetera. Also have done some outreach with the towns, and some of the towns have stepped forward. And NOR, Ali Hassan, has been very, very helpful in this effort. And we've got, where are we with additional towns stepping forward with ARPA dollars?
Town of Frankfort is putting up 50,000, and Town of Harrison is putting up 15,000, and I'm expecting, hopefully, Town of Macmillan, their board is meeting on Monday. It's on their agenda, and hopefully we'll get something from there as well.
And those commitments significantly strengthen the grants because one of the things is partnerships. So what we're floating is, we're floating a high-end proposal because last year we had $38 million of requests from Marathon County. We got one funded for less than $1 million. And there's $100 million available through the public service grant application. We will not not all of these communities will be awarded, these grants are awarded, but the problem is we need to pledge sort of a commitment. So what you have before you today is a resolution that incorporates the 235 forgivable loan or grant, whatever you want to call it, and then making loans available to others. Frontier and Serenity are not interested in loans. Bug Tussle is. So if we did all of the 235, the net to the county would be a little over $1,157,000. The total exposure to the county if we did the loans is a little over approximately $4,115,000. But again, I don't anticipate that would be the case. And that would be an ARPA. We would look at ARPA to make a loan with a 20-year payback. So what we would lose is the current value of that, or the future value of that money. And it is an eligible expense under the ARPA program. So we're bringing it before you today. I think my recommendation going forward, so we can avoid some of this duplication, is that when we solicit partnership opportunities, that we target the specific area and we ask them to provide a proposal to serve that area. Because that gets us out of this overlapping and trying to figure out what's there. There will be challenges I know there will be challenges to Frontier, and because Frontier and Serenity overlap, there will be challenges to Serenity. I'm not anticipating challenges. That doesn't mean they won't occur to the Bug Tussle because they tried to carve out areas that other players weren't in, but we don't know. And by targeting it, we can look at the PSC maps, we can look at the Geo Partners data that we're collecting on the speed test and focus our resources on the highest priority areas, but that's for the future. And then we can also leverage that to develop greater partnerships with local school districts, the local communities, local governments, and for instance, Marshfield Clinic is a player in this, and try to focus those resources in a better manner. So we have a proposal before you today.
The only one thing I would add is the Serenity application also has the participation from the town, and they're offering their support also in addition to the Marathon County support that's being offered in that area that Serenity's got the grant application in for.
And we have 3 other members of the task force here.
Questions, concerns by the committee? And this was taken to HR Finance. HR Finance approved it with the recommendation moving to the full board for its consideration.
As well as infrastructure.
As well as infrastructure, excuse me. Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we asked this question yesterday at HR Finance about my concerns with Frontier following that they had filed bankruptcy or whatever, and the issues that we've had with many residents in Marathon County with them not honoring their service that they had. But Supervisor Robinson explained the reason for that, and I've had, like I said, I've had concerns about Frontier ever since the issues we had with them in the past. Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson?
I think that's a legitimate concern that will be on the minds of many people and probably affect their take rate if they do expand service in those areas. But the intent, again, of Frontier, first of all, corporately, they've had a rethinking and repurposing of the corporation. I think they are looking at their future, and copper wires is not their future. So I think that they're committed to fiber and advancing that. But it is, according to Scott Bowler, who we've been talking with, is an effort to try to lay that fiber over their current copper wire area. We've had discussions about, so what happened in CAF 2 when they got the money, but that was for a 10-1 service. That 10-1 service is history, and it just isn't adequate. There will be challenges to a portion of their proposal. I'm not sure what the success rate will be, but it is encouraging to see someone step up and trying to get fiber in many of those underserved areas. And I know Supervisor Boots and others would welcome that and in those build-outs. But we've come a long way since then, and I think the corporate restructuring, they're not interested in a loan for, I think, that very reason, because they're in reorganization. Their borrowing capacity is probably limited. They haven't come out and said that, but I would anticipate that that's a consequence of where they are with their reorganization. And they have to complete the work under the PSC within 2 years of the award. So there's a deliverable deadline.
Supervisor Boots and then Supervisor Langenhahn next.
Knock it off, Craig. So no, we do have Frontier actually at our house now, and it's actually been phenomenal. So we had satellite, terrible, and now we do have Frontier, and we've had no issues so far. You're going to still get some outages during bad weather. It's just the way it is out there. But I mean, for the most part, 99% satisfied. So that's one good thing. I guess I just wanted a little update. We pretty good speeds, download and upload. So.
Supervisor Langenhahn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a question in regards to the funding for the grant. Supervisor Robinson had mentioned that it was a 20-year, sorry, was it grant or loan? Is it grant?
Loan.
Loan, sorry, thank you. That was a 20-year loan. How does that work with the ARPA funds? Because their sunset date is essentially December 31st, 2026, and this would take us way past that date. So I don't know if staff or John, if you could answer that. I'm just curious how that works.
I'll try to take a stab at it, and please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that we have to encumber and spend the money by that date. That doesn't preclude us from entering into partnerships and agreements relative to repayment. And because broadband is one of those clearly defined eligible activities, we think it qualifies. I think obviously we'll have to do some verification of that before we finalize those loan documents, but by the virtue of us making that available, and that's something that quite honestly was floated by Bug Tussle in their desire to expand in looking for a way to get as much services as they can as quickly as they can. So we think that it's an eligible expense and that this would allow it. And the good thing for the county is we get the money back. So we're making an investment, and our investment is a loss. We're freezing, we're losing the future value of money, but we do get the money back for other purposes.
I think Supervisor Robinson adequately explained it. We certainly are in compliance with the expenditure requirements. We are expending the money by the deadlines you referenced, 2024. The question that I have in my mind is it an appropriate use to have a repayment? I don't see anything thus far that I've found that says having a provision, utilizing the funds for a loan doesn't appear to make it ineligible. But as you know, Supervisor Langenhahn, the documents for that final rule are 419 pages long. Nora and I have looked through a considerable amount of it, but I need to read that multiple times, not just once. So that's something we need to look at, but I don't believe right now, based on anything I've seen, that it's an ineligible use.
Supervisor Langenhahn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to clarify, the funds being allocated by December 31st, 2024, and then the projects to be completed by December 31st, 2026. That 2026 is what I was more curious about. I mean, I would think, common sense-wise, that with many communities across the United States that are interested in doing these types of projects, that I don't want to call it a flexibility, but that ability for the local government to design these long-term loans would be within the purview of ARPA. I was just curious if we had a definitive. I'm thinking so, but yeah.
I don't have a definitive opinion on anyone or any entity that I would put any stock in that it's valuable. But to your point on the 2026 for the project being done, as Chair Robinson referenced, according to the PSC grant, those timelines are shorter than that, 2 years, that they should have the project completed based on, after the allocation of the grant from the PSC.
Thank you.
Other questions? So what is your pleasure? Supervisor Robinson?
I will move that we recommend approval of the resolution and advance it to the full county board.
And seconded by Supervisor Guild. Is there any discussion? Again, because this is committing ARPA dollars, and it would be, in addition to the current budget, this would require 2/3 majority vote of the board. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we will call for the vote. The motion is to approve the resolution and move to the full board for its consideration, a recommendation to adopt the resolution for the funding partnerships with the various grant applications for broadband expansion in Marathon County. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carried and is unanimous. Thank you. And we will now move to, and I'm getting back to my agenda, sorry. Agenda item number E, annual evaluation of the county administrator. And if somebody is so inclined to read item E1, the closed session language. Supervisor Langenhan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85 sub 1 sub C to consider performance evaluation data of a public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, namely the county administrator.
Roll call vote is required, and seconded by Supervisor Robinson first. And so a roll call vote, ask the clerk to call the roll.
Gibbs.
Aye.
McEwen. Aye. Boots. Aye. Budke.
Aye.
Guild. Aye. Pfeifferich. Langenhan.
Aye.
Leahy. Aye. Mask. Robinson.
Aye.
And the motion is carried, and I will make a note to all of the individuals that we have joining us on the WebEx that you will be removed and moved into the waiting area, and that unfortunately includes Supervisor Budke. Under our board rules, closed session for committees must be in person. Unfortunately,